So today is obviously Headline Highlights, where we are going through all the different cases that are happening right now in the true crime world. And well, I was kind of surprised in a happy way that there weren't a ton of cases to cover this week. I was like, oh, maybe we're like getting our shit together as, the humankind. There are a lot of cases that have the same kind of thread weaved throughout them, which is very disturbing. But before we get into those new cases, let's do a couple updates really quick. So a lot of you guys have been requesting that I talk about this case, and we did talk a little bit about it last week on Headline Highlights, but it's the case that is breaking out of Ohio, and it is the Tepe case with the dentist and his wife who were found brutally murdered inside their home. So let me give you a quick little recap on this before I get into the updates. So right after Christmas, police responded to a home, and they found Spencer and Monique Tepe shot and killed inside. But then they realized even something more disturbing. Their two young kids were inside the house as they found their parents. But the kids, luckily, were alive. They had not been hurt. But at this point, everything pretty much shifted in the investigation. Because now you're not just talking about a double homicide. You're also talking about children who were there inside this family home, and their parents just kind of killed and wiped out in a single night with a ton of unanswered questions left. So pretty quickly, the investigators started looking at Monique's ex-husband, Michael McKe. He and Monique had been married from 2015 to 2017. So although not super recent, they were trying to see if there were any connections anywhere because this looked very deliberate. It looked very targeted. So they, of course, were going to look into people who were close with the couple, right? So from everything that had been reported, their divorce was not messy at all. It was also a very short-lived marriage, 2 years, right? 2 years, almost 10 years ago now. There were no big public blow-ups, nothing that would, on the surface, immediately make you think that things could ever end up this way. But sure enough, they did make an arrest, and that is who they arrested. They say that Michael shot both Monique and her current husband, Spencer, and then fled the state. So he ended up being arrested in Illinois, where he was living at the time, and this was after investigators say that they had tracked him using a mix of surveillance footage, vehicle information, and digital data that placed him at the family's home and also showed his movements afterwards. But like I said, prosecutors are calling it a very targeted, very intentional act. Not random, not a break-in gone wrong, something that was methodical, thought out, and planned, which it makes you wonder, not only what was the underlying motive that made him do this, but how long had that hatred and resentment been brewing? If they had been divorced for almost, just shy of a decade, this is something that must have been in motion for a while, I would imagine. And we have been doing a lot of research in this. We have pulled so many documents, so much information. So yes, a deep dive is coming very, very soon. And some of those questions will be answered. But he is now facing 2 counts of murder, and he's also in the process of being extradited back to Ohio, which I just saw that the other day he waived his right to extradition or whatever. So that's kind of where we're at with everything. But like I said, through our research, there is a lot below the line here regarding 911 calls that were made and accusations made well before the murders, some things from the past.